NBA free agency is well underway. What I want to do, I want to go through the 30 NBA teams, and from this point till let's say the mid-season point, I'm going to give each team one thing to focus on to add to their roster. Should be tons of fun. If you enjoy, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. Starting off with the Boston Celtics, and we'll start in the Eastern Conference, go down from their standings where they were last season, and we'll make our way over to the West. For Boston, it's quality veterans. And of course, at this point, new ownership with the team recently being put up for sale. But quality veterans, they just gave, of course, Jaylen Brown got a bag last offseason. Jason Tatum just got a huge $300 million deal, much deserved, by the way. But Derek White also got paid. They're just throwing money around there in Boston. At this point in time, they need some veterans, some quality veterans to come over and I guess play for cheap, right? Guys like Nick Batum are still out there. He could be a solid wing for this Boston bench. Just guys of that nature. But I think again they already have this team that could easily go back to back. But just adding a couple quality pieces in case some injuries happen, that's not a bad way to go. For the New York Knicks, you need a rotational big. We know Tom Thibodeau in his career has made a lot of bigs look relevant. Now, he's also had guys like Joakim Noah in his career, but a guy like Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson, they came out of nowhere. And a large part of that is due to Tom Thibodeau being the great defensive coach that he is for these big men. So you just need to go out there. You lost Isaiah Hartenstein. Let's go out and get our semi-replacement because there's not any centers out there on the market now that we believe can be Isaiah Hartenstein from day one. So let's go out there and get a semi-replacement and a rotational big for Isaiah Hartenstein. For the Milwaukee Bucks, three-point shooting. Malik Beasley is still a free agent. You still have Buddy Hield that is a free agent at this point in time. There's a lot of shooters out there. Luke Kennard is another guy. What are we going to do? Because we have Damian Lillard, we have Chris Middleton, and Giannis, of course. We need some three-point shooting. We ranked almost dead last in the league last year in that statistic. Let's go out there and get some much-needed three-point shooting. Again, whether that's Beasley, Buddy Hield, or another option, I'm excited to see what they can do. But I will say, off of potential, they did have a pretty great draft, and I hope they bring back Patrick Beverley to be a great veteran mouthpiece and mentor for guys like Tyler Smith and, of course, the guard they drafted in the first round. For the Cavs, of course, like I mentioned in the intro, Donovan Mitchell just got a big extension. We are happy as Cavs fans. This dude owes us nothing. He could have easily just got up and walked away. So we're extremely lucky that Donovan Mitchell sees a future here in Cleveland. And I could have said trade Jared Allen. I could have said trade Darius Garland. But at this point in time, since we have this core four back together, it's just about adding quality depth, right? Whether that's bringing back Marcus Morris, who had a very solid second round series for us, whether that's bringing back whoever or bringing in whoever on a cheaper deal because we don't have a lot of money. We need quality depth at this point in the season, whether if it's, well, I'll say this, whether if it's at this point or by the mid-season mark, if we want to compete for a title next season, we need some quality depth. For Orlando, three-point shooting. Now, you did bring in KCP. I'm happy you brought in KCP. But there's still some guys out there. Guys like D'Angelo Russell via trade. Guys that, again, Buddy Hield, I'll keep bringing it up. Taurean Prince, Tyus Jones. There's some guards out there and some wings that can provide you with much-needed spacing on a team that doesn't have much of it from their star players at this point in time. Paolo Banchero stepped out and he had an amazing first-round series from the three-point line. But do we want to rely on that? Is that the new version of Paolo that we're going to see on a nightly basis? I'm not sold yet. So Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, again, they're dominant. They're going to continue to grow and be dominant in the years come. But we need some three-point shooting. And the KCP is a good start. But let's go out there and get one or two pieces more, right? To make this team an interesting contender in the Eastern Conference next season. Maybe to make it to like the Eastern Conference Finals. For the Pacers, a quality piece, but preferably a big man. You lost Jalen Smith, and there's no one really here to back up a guy like Miles Turner. Now, of course, you can always stagger the minutes where Pascal's the center sometime, or Miles Turner is the rest of it. But a guy like Rick Carlisle has always carried a lot of defensive bigs on his roster. So going out there and getting another quality big man, why not, right? For a team like Indiana that already has so many talented wings and guards, of course, that you just kind of need to round out the roster. And again, we're talking about your 10th man at this point, 9th, 10th man. Just go out there and try and get a quality big man that can run and shoot the ball, preferably. For the Philadelphia 76ers, spacing, right? Or to go back to this, now that the Sixers pop up, a guy like Paul Reed is still a free agent. He would be perfect in Indiana if Philly decides not to bring him back. Just throwing it out there. But for Philly, spacing, and again, also to bring back Paul Reed. But spacing for Philly at this point, you have your super team. You have Tyrese, you have Paul George, and you have Joel Embiid. You also brought back a guy, like Kelly Oubre. So now it's all about just getting the spacing to throw around these guys. I understand you brought in Eric Gordon. That's a good start. But again, there's some other better shooters and spacers out there. And especially, again, if you could find a big that can shoot the ball, I think that would open up a lot for guys like Paul George and Tyrese Maxey. Give this offense a different look is what I'm getting at. But Philadelphia spacing, I'd say, from now until the midseason mark, if they want to compete, that's probably the biggest thing they have to focus on. Just getting some more around those star players, right? For Miami, a lead guard, right? Whether if it's Russell Westbrook via trade, D'Angelo Russell via trade, or a guy like Tyus Jones, who is still currently out there on the market. Miami needs a lead guard. They've needed one really since Kyle Lowry left town. But again, they thought it was going to be Terry Rozier. And even if he did change his game, at heart, Terry Rozier is not a facilitating, playmaking level point guard. He's more of a I'm gonna get my point guard, right? But getting a guy like Russ, for example, he's a $4 million contract. You could trade him probably. You could probably get him via trade for a couple second-round picks in your 13th man. Getting a guy like Russell Westbrook, sure, it's not a lot of spacing, but he's a lead guard. He's going to buy into the Heat culture. I think Russ on paper is a perfect fit in Miami, but the best fit here, of course, is D'Angelo Russell because of that spacing ability. For Chicago, move on, right? DeMar DeRozan is still a free agent at this point in time. There's already been reports that you want to move off of Lonzo Ball too. So go out there and just move on, right? Zach LaVine he's not gonna be a Chicago Bull next season. I honestly think at this point, everybody is buying the Chicago Bulls bluff, and Zach LaVine is probably gonna get cut here. As crazy as that might sound, he might get cut here, and he might be a free agent to join one of these contenders, maybe a team like Sacramento or a team like Memphis, something to look out for. But for Chicago, you got to get off of these guys, right? Trade LaVine, trade DeMar DeRozan, and of course, trade Lonzo Ball if he is ready to go for next season. Now, Vucevic, you don't necessarily have to trade him. He could just be a good veteran mouthpiece for some of your younger pieces. And Vucevic only has one more year on his deal left. So maybe Vucevic comes out, plays quality ball to start the year, and you trade him at the midseason mark for some draft capital. Just something to look out for. But it's time for a new chapter in Chicago basketball. It's been way too long since they've been on the top. And that just, again, for one of the marquee NBA franchises, it's time for them to get back to that, being closer to the top instead of just a play-in merchant. For the Atlanta Hawks, of course, you traded away DeJounte Murray. You need some more backcourt defense now. And whoever you want to say that is, you could bring in Patrick Beverley for all I care. Trae Young is now a man in that backcourt that cannot hide. And this is a guy that's never going to be great at defense because of his height. And of course, well, how much he carries on the offensive side of the ball. But this is a team now that has everything else. You just need some backcourt defense. So unless you're going to play extremely big next year, go out there and get a guy like, if I'm not mistaken, Cam Reddish is a free agent. Go out there and get someone like that. Go out there and get some of the quality two-way wings that you could throw next to Trae Young. And it doesn't have to be an elite option, but just have a 2 or 3 guys that you can swap out depending on who's hot, right, on a nightly basis. But backcourt defense from this point until the midseason mark at the trade deadline, if you want to make a playoff push, because who cares about the play-in? If you want to make a playoff push, go out there and you need some backcourt defense. And of course, you need Trae Young to stay healthy. For Brooklyn, you traded Mikal Bridges. You traded your best player. What some people believe was your cornerstone of your new chapter in Brooklyn Nets basketball, but you traded him away, and you traded him away for a plethora of picks. And what that tells me is Sean Marks is going to go full throttle into this rebuild for the Brooklyn Nets. And to me, that means trading Cam Johnson, right? Now, I know you brought back Nick Claxton, but he's such a young piece. He could be your next building block for the future. But Cam Johnson, what do you do with him? What do you do with Cam Thomas if there's any interest around the league? Do you bring back Lonnie Walker? He's still a free agent. There's some interesting free agents out there for the Brooklyn Nets, of course, on their own team, but also, again, Cam Johnson for the third time. What do you do with him and his large contract? I definitely think some team would take his contract at the midseason mark. But my other biggest question for them and my one big focus for them from now until, again, the trade deadline, what is Ben Simmons' role when he comes back? And if he's healthy, is he going to play for you? Is he going to be, do you believe there's still a 0.1% chance that he can actually be your lead guard? I think, Ben Simmons, the potential's there. The confidence is just not. This is a guy that was an all NBA level defender on a yearly basis. But ever since that one layup attempt, it seems like everything's gone downhill. So to me, determine Ben Simmons' role. What are you going to do with him, right? Are you going to pay him? Are you going to cut him? Are you going to let him try and figure it out and regain his confidence on the court? A lot of questions need to be answered here in Brooklyn. But if one thing, go all in on this rebuild and go after a guy like Cooper Flagg next year. Maybe he could be ready from day one and with the roster around him, compete for a playing spot. For the Toronto Raptors, trade Bruce Brown. Right now, you have, you traded for Davion Mitchell. You drafted Jamal Sheed out of Houston. Two guys that are scrappy, and they do exactly what Bruce Brown does, maybe to a better level. We'll have to see what Jamal Sheed turns out to be. But he also has this $23 million contract. It's a one-year deal. I'm sure a contending team, for example, like Milwaukee, would make a phone call and saying, we could use a guy like Bruce Brown on our championship push. So just throwing it out there, if you could trade Bruce Brown, continue with this rebuild and these younger pieces that you have, I think would be huge for your not only salary cap space, right, but just for the development of some of your younger pieces. For Charlotte, quality veterans, or you could just focus on bringing Miles Bridges back. Of course, Miles Bridges is still a free agent. A guy still gave you 21-7 in limited games last season. Is he going to cost a pretty penny? Sure, but you're Charlotte. You have to overpay to keep some of your quality players. So you could bring back Miles Bridges or go out there and just get quality veterans. And I'm not talking crazy, high-priced guys. Go out there and get Taurean Prince. Give him a Jonas Valanciunas level contract. 2 to 3 years, $10+ million a year. Go out there and overpay a little bit for Taurean Prince. Have him come to Charlotte, a losing situation, by the way, and just be a quality veteran and mouthpiece for guys like LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, and of course some other pieces you have there in Charlotte. I think that goes underrated just to have a veteran there to help them go through day-by-day life. And of course, Taurean Prince has been teammates with the best of the best. So having him there for some of these younger pieces in Charlotte could be huge, right? For Washington, same thing as Brooklyn. Go all in. Go in for Cooper Flagg or whoever the number one pick of next year's draft is. But man, what are we doing with Jonas Valanciunas? We're not the OKC Thunder. We don't have this huge plethora of first-round picks. Now, I understand you got a couple of them for a guy like Bradley Beal, and unless you're really planning on using some of that draft capital that you got from Bradley Beal to trade with Jonas, if he decides to fall off the face of the planet, I just think that I understand you don't have to pay anybody because you're Washington, but what's the motive behind bringing Jonas in? Maybe, I guess, to bring some spacing and some facilitating to this offense. Actually, now that I think about it, probably not a bad signing, but I think, a 3-year deal is a pretty rich deal for Jonas Valanciunas. But no doubt, I think at the midseason mark, if he's playing really good basketball, whether if it's this season or next season, you're going to have some contenders calling Washington's phone. For Detroit, a big trade. To me, you have the roster, and now you have a great head coach hire. I'm a Cavs fan. JB Bickerstaff's just not a good contending coach, just like Kenny Atkinson is not a great contending head coach. Sorry to say that about our new coach, but these are just guys that are more so known for building up these younger talent. They're developmental coaches. Guys like Scott Brooks, developmental coach back in the day. JB Bickerstaff's a great hire for this team. Unlike Monty Williams, again, he's a developmental guy, and he's going to help these guys grow into their own. So you have a team now with Cade. Of course, you have Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. That's your big three. And of course, you still have Asar Thompson. You still have some of these other talented wing options. To me, for Detroit, Do you pull a trigger? At the midseason mark, if your team is competing for that 6th seed or a play-in spot, do you go out there and pull a big trade-off, maybe for a big name center? Do you trade Isaiah Stewart and James Wiseman off to go out there and get a solid bench piece to help you make a play-in push? Just some things to look out for or look at for Detroit. But other than having a big trade, it's a developmental year. Let's crack 30 wins. Moving over to the West. Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't know if there's been bigger winners this offseason than the OKC Thunder. I mean, you fleece the Chicago Bulls on paper for an all defensive NBA guard, getting Alex Caruso, absolute steal of a trade. And then you go out there and get, of course, you bring back your guys. You bring back Aaron Wiggins. You bring back Isaiah Joe. You bring in Isaiah Hartenstein on a bigger contract. And if you've been following the channel, I worry about that Isaiah Hartenstein contract, that he might turn out to be the next Timofey Mozgov or Bismack Biyombo, centers that play really good basketball for a short period of time, and then they're up for contract. So they get overpaid. But the good thing for OKC is you have 300 first-round picks. So if that does continue to happen for Hartenstein, you can easily trade him away. But outside of that, you've done your damage. If you're OKC, you have your starting lineup. You have really 12 to 13 quality players on this roster. Just stand pat, run it back. And of course, if you want to make a big trade at the midseason mark, depending on who's frustrated, go ahead, right? If you want to wait till next offseason, that's when you can make a big deal. But this is a team that made it to the second round of the Western Conference playoffs with no experience, little to none. And now you get a better roster. All I'm going to say is this is a team that is going to battle Boston for years. Of course, we all know this about who's going to be the next NBA's dynasty. This version of the Boston Celtics or this version of the Oklahoma City Thunder. For the Denver Nuggets, it's scary. If you're a Denver Nuggets fan, you were on top of the world 2 years ago, and you looked at your roster and said, we have the perfect roster to be the NBA's next dynasty. But it's quickly falling apart. And now you don't have KCP. You don't have some of these bench pieces. Of course, you've lost over the years. So now you have a scarce bench, and you don't have, you lost Reggie Jackson as well. You traded him away. So you have basically your best bench player right now is Christian Braun or Zeke Naji. Doesn't move the needle. Your starting two guard is probably Christian Braun at this point, which makes the bench even more scarce. So to me, you need to go out there and make a big move. These graphics are a little bit outdated. I know Klay Thompson is a Maverick, so let's keep that in mind. But Russell Westbrook, to me, would be your bulldog, right? To run the second unit. He would literally be a guard version of Aaron Gordon at this point in his career. So he can just sit in the dunker spot, whether if he's playing with Jokic or if he's running the show, he can be Russell Westbrook, setting these younger guys up, being a great veteran for some of these younger pieces that you might have off the bench. Something to look out for. Or if a guy like Bruce Brown gets bought out from the Toronto Raptors, which I doubt, but if it happens, he could find his way back to Denver and be immediately the starting two guard yet again. So some things to look out for here. But Denver needs some quality depth. They need a starter, first off, whether that's Christian Braun or not. And you need some quality depth. A guy like Monte Morris you can bring back. He was in Denver just a few years ago. Bring him back. Bring in some of these guys on a cheaper deal and persuade them to say, we just need enough talent around Jokic and you can have a Larry O'Brien trophy, right? You got to get interesting with your pitches here. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you have the best player in the world, and maybe that's just all you need. For Minnesota, no mo, slow mo. This is one I'm proud of. I pat on the back, right? I got a little creative with this one. But you're in a bit of a salary cap situation if you're Minnesota, meaning that you might lose Kyle Anderson, slow-mo, in other words, or you might also lose Monte Morris. You might lose both of them, and they're quality bench and rotational pieces for you this past season. But just due to salary cap reasons, I know this front office doesn't want to go over that second apron. So unless there's a significant pay cut from these veteran guys like Monte and Kyle Anderson, I don't see them returning to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So from now until the midseason mark, who is going to step up or who is going to replace them? Or are we just going to run into the same problem that Denver had where we don't have as much depth as we do or as the season prior? Something to look out for Minnesota, but quality depth would be my answer here for Minnesota. For the Clippers, at this point in time, is DeMar DeRozan the replacement for Paul George? It's seemingly on paper, right? But I don't think they have the cap space after bringing in guys like, of course, Derrick Jones Jr., right? A guy that they paid a decent contract to. I think in order for DeMar DeRozan to end up being a Los Angeles Clipper, it would probably have to be a signing trade for PJ Tucker, right? And some draft capital. Now, the Clippers don't have pretty much any draft capital. And why would the Bulls see any reason to bring in a guy like PJ Tucker? Something to look out for. But if something like that can happen, a signing trade, he could step in and be Paul George's replacement on a nightly basis. Moving over to the Dallas Mavericks. And I understand it says 3-point shooting. Again, I was a little bit too lazy this morning to update the graphics, but I know Klay Thompson signed with them. I think that's a steal of a contract. In fact, it says Klay left some money on the table to join this Dallas Mavericks team. So what does that say about the pitch and the talent and the camaraderie about this current Dallas Mavericks team? Klay saw something special. If you wanted to leave the Warriors on a pay cut, again, what does that say about this Dallas Mavericks team? But why not get more three-point shooting? Or to me, what if you can go out there and persuade a team like Brooklyn, who's trying to tear it down, to get a DFS, bring him back to town? What would a late first do? And of course, maybe a cap filler, right? A late first and a cap filler, maybe like Maxi Kleber, to get a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith. Bringing a guy like that back to Dallas, that's something that could be interesting. Now, you did bring in Najee Marshall, so maybe you don't need a DFS, right? So now you have a lineup where you can roll out Luka, Kyrie, Klay, PJ Washington, and Gafford. Off the bench, you have Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, and Derek Lively. That's very, very solid. And of course, I think you just need maybe one or two more pieces. Maybe Buddy Hield. I have him on the graphic. Maybe Buddy Hield could say, I want to go play for that team. I want to go shoot all. I want to go be the sixth man of this team and shoot the lights out. Of course, next to Luka and Kyrie and Klay Thompson at that point. Something to look out for. But at this point, I'd be okay if they just stand pat. But from now into the midseason mark, why not? Let's go out there and get another quality wing. Of course, that's still out there on the market. I'm going to keep throwing his name out there. But Taurean Prince is the name to look out for. For the Phoenix Suns, they need a facilitator. You know, I've talked about this on the Bleacher Report live stream yesterday. So I might as well touch on that topic as I'm here. I am currently affiliated with the Bleacher Report, of course, the Bleacher Report, and from periodically I host different streams for them here, and it's always a great show. So if you're interested, of course, check out my socials. And in fact, this Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern, this Friday as in July 5th, I'm going to be hosting another live stream for them. Again, 11 a.m. Eastern. So if you're interested, stop by and let me know that you're coming from the podcast. But for Phoenix, they need a facilitator. And I've talked about it here a lot. I think a Russ reunion makes a lot of sense for Phoenix. He can come in via trade on a very cheap deal, and he can technically be your starter from day one. For one, it checks a lot of boxes for Russell Westbrook. He can be a starter on a championship level team, and he gets to play with a lot of good players, right? Again, championship level team, a lot of good players. For Phoenix, you get a lead facilitator, and you get a guy that's going to bring you intensity. He's going to bring you defense, and he's going to just bring you 110% effort on every single play. It could get some of those role players to be like, okay, I want to play with this guy, which we hear so much about a guy like Russell Westbrook. But if this were to happen, I would like to see Bradley Beal take a sixth man role and come off the bench. Now, if that happens, Bradley Beal won't be qualifying for any Sixth Man of the Year awards because of the fact he's going to be playing way too many minutes. And again, being a bench player doesn't mean that you're being demoted, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to play 25 to 30 minutes a night. I think Bradley Beal can do exactly that, play 30 minutes a night, but Russell Westbrook is just going to start the game with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, get them in their spots, get them hot, get this offense rolling, and then 5 minutes into the game, here comes Bradley Beal, right? That's all I'm getting at. A Russ reunion makes a lot of sense, if not Tyus Jones, if not D'Angelo Russell via trade. Phoenix needs a facilitator outside of Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. For the Lakers, technically LeBron's still a free agent, but keeping LeBron, and not only keeping him, but keeping him happy. He's willing to take a pay cut for a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who's still out there. If that happens, that fit is kind of janky, especially when it comes to the postseason. But LeBron's improved his three-point shot. If Anthony Davis can improve his three-point shot, more so than it was the last couple of years, then DeMar DeRozan signing makes a lot of sense because they can all space out and they can all attack in the mid-range. And of course, the cup there, whether if it's a regular season or the postseason. But at this point, LeBron's willing to take a pay cut, and there's nobody really. A lot of the big names are starting to fall off. So either you attack depth or you go after and get that one big name, whatever it is, keeping LeBron happy in his age 39, eventually 40 season is the biggest thing for the Los Angeles Lakers. For the Pelicans, trade Brandon Ingram. I think it's about that time, right? Now, if you bring in a guy like Tyus Jones, I want to see how the season plays out from now to the midseason mark. But obviously, something is not working. And if you're going to decide, if you're the Pelicans, to just run it back, but maybe with a different center, that's not going to move the needle for me. So, again, I know that they traded for DeJounte Murray. Now they have a lineup, of course, with, DeJounte at the one, of course, DeJounte at the one, CJ at the two, BI, Zion, and of course, whatever center, or if they want to play small and have Herb Jones or Trey Murphy in the mix, something to look out for. But this team has needed a facilitator. Is DeJounte going to be that guy? We'll have to see if he wants to take that much of a back seat. Brandon Ingram, of course, is a guy that could, garner a lot of attention around the league. Let's say you're not sold on what's going on with DeJounte Murray, or if DeJounte Murray's just been great, but he's not a facilitator. What if you trade Brandon Ingram for a guy like Darius Garland? That's been a rumored package to throw out there, gives you a different look, and then you can have a lineup, of course, where CJ McCollum comes off the bench for the first time in a long time, and you can have Garland, of course, DeJounte, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and Zion. That sounds scary for the New Orleans Pelicans, but you got to answer that question. Is it time to trade Brandon Ingram? Something to look out for. A team that could take him is the Sacramento Kings, a team that I think is in need of a big trade, right? We know they have their big two, right? And then outside of that, Keon Ellis is solid. Of course, Keegan Murray, not only does he have the best crowd chant in the NBA, but he's also an elite three-point sniper. Of course, the Black Falcon, Harrison Barnes, is still on the roster. You need to go out there and get a big trade, whether if it's Brandon Ingram, whether if it's Lauri Markkanen, whoever it is, right? You need to go out there and make a big trade to push this team from being a playing team to a legitimate contender here in the Western Conference. I'm interested to see what that could potentially be. But from now to the midseason mark, let's try and get that big trade off, even if it is try and fleece another GM, just like the Thunder did with the Chicago Bulls. For the Golden State Warriors, the Splash Bros are no longer a thing. And again, these graphics, a little bit outdated, completely my fault. But if you're the Golden State Warriors, no more Splash Bros in the Bay. So where do we go from now? You have to refill that void. And I understand Klay Thompson was going to be a sixth man for this team anyway, per reports. But now you have a lineup that's very youthful, and you have not a lot of shooting outside of Steph Curry. Pods is okay. Kuminga's okay, but they're not that knockdown threat that has that much gravity on the court like Klay Thompson did, even when he was struggling on the court. He was always getting attention and some of the hardest defenses out there because of his history. So now it's all about getting quality depth pieces around Steph Curry because these big names are falling off the board. So whether if you can go out there and convince a guy like DeMar to take a pay cut, that would be interesting, give you a different look, but I worry about the spacing there still. Or if you just want to go out there and hammer out these role players like Taurean Prince, go out there and get Buddy Hield. Some of these guys that could give you spacing and defense, something the Warriors have always wanted. But a big trade for this team as well. If they can trade off Andrew Wiggins, would it be huge for this Warriors team, especially as far as capitalizing on Stephen Curry's last great years. For Houston, I'll keep this one short. Keep your core. You have a great core. You have really 7 to 8 great young building blocks for your team, and it's all led by Alperen Sengun, one of the most underrated players in the league today. I might go as far to say he's a top 5 center. As crazy as that might sound, but he's already shown the flashes. And you have that guy to lead your charge with Jalen Green, who could be a potential all-star one day. And with all these solid defensive veterans, Ime Udoka has done a great job to build this team up. Just keep your core, right? You had a high draft pick this year. Just keep your core, keep building. For Utah, trade Lauri Markkanen? That's a question, just like the Pelicans have to answer. What if it's time to move off of Lauri Markkanen? And I understand they want to bring him back, but I don't think his value has ever been higher, and I don't think it's going to be much higher. So if you're Utah, a team that isn't going to be able to compete for more so than a play-in next year, why not trade Lauri Markkanen? Get some much-needed draft capital. Maybe put yourself in a position with losing Lauri to get a guy like Cooper Flagg, right? I think he can get multiple first-round picks and maybe a building block for a guy like Lauri. So if you're Utah, something to look out for. But if not, running it back for Lauri Markkanen makes a lot of sense. But I think at this point, trading him now, you're going to get a lot more than if you wait and trade him at the midseason mark if the intention is to trade Lauri Markkanen. For Memphis, you're in need of a big move. I want to keep throwing it out there, but a sign and trade for a guy like DeMar DeRozan makes sense. Maybe you can send Luke Kennard and a sign and trade over. Of course, that is mostly a joke. But what if a package of like Brandon Clark? What if you have a package of like Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard, and maybe a first round pick for a guy like DeMar DeRozan? I think both sides say okay if that is the trade. But again, if you're Memphis, I think you can be a contender next season just running it back with this roster. You have a team with, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane. Of course, Marcus Smart is in the mix. Jaren Jackson Jr. You have everything you need. You just need Ja to stay healthy. And of course, not to be on IG Live, to put it short. But Memphis, you just need to be healthy. And to me, going out there and getting some shooters to play on your roster next to Ja Morant only makes this team more dangerous around your star players. So, again, Buddy Hield, Luke Kennard, there's shooters out there, right? Go out there and get a shooter to add to this rotation. For the Spurs, Gary Trent Jr. I think I had to go back to the Memphis Grizzlies. Gary Trent Jr. would be perfect here if they can kind of persuade him to take a mid-level exception. But Memphis, of course, have a lot of options. Now back to the Spurs, and I promise I'm not going back, Spurs fans. But you need a defensive big, and to me, you did a good job out there. You grabbed Chris Paul. He's going to help all of these young players grow and develop into. He's going to help them take that next step. And he's going to be on the second unit probably running the bench with guys like Keldon Johnson. So the Spurs team quickly has become a deep team, especially now they also drafted Stephon Castle, and they can still go out there and add a guy like Tyus Jones to be the starting point guard for this team. Or they can go out there and of course, add one of these role players that I've mentioned all video. Something to look out for the Spurs. But I think getting an interesting look for this team is going out there and getting a defensive big man. I don't know who that is. I'd have to see the list of free agents in front of me. But let's go out there and get a defensive-minded big man. He doesn't have to start, but I think he could be in the rotation. And Wembanyama was maybe the greatest rookie defender we've ever seen on ball and off ball. But imagine him roaming. Imagine him being that four like he was, of course, overseas before he came into the NBA. Imagine him being a help defender. Imagine how scary and elite that would be, especially with his length here. He could play probably so far off of his actual assignment that it's going to cause a lot of problem and clog up the paint for a lot of these teams against the Spurs. But this team is scary. All of a sudden, they have decent amount of depth, and I'm just throwing out different possibilities. What if a guy, becomes available at the deadline and he's a defensive-minded big? Go after it. Go after and attack it and give the Spurs team a different look and make this team more dangerous than it needs to be. For the Portland Trailblazers, just like the Houston Rockets, stand pat. You have a lot of young depth here. You brought in some more young pieces throughout the draft. You have your top 7, top 8 guys. Why go out there and make any big moves to disrupt that? Scoot Henderson needs to continue to develop. Anthony Simons, does he have another step in his game? That's something we have to look out for. Of course, you have other guys, on this team that you just need to grow and develop. Of course, you brought in the center here, Donovan Clingan, in the draft. You still have DeAndre Ayton, who showed a lot of flashes there late in the season, but who are you going to trust to be your lead big man there in Portland? Something to look out for. But again, they have a lot of great young pieces. Shaedon Sharpe is another guy. Just let them develop at the end of the day. Don't make any stupid trades and act like you're a team that's ready to compete for a play-in spot this early in their developments. But that's going to do it. A lot of talking. We probably did it a lot faster than I intended to do. But at the end of the day, episode 187 in the books. If you enjoyed, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. And I do want to throw it out there that tomorrow we have some fantasy football content. And on Thursday, we predict all of the AFC West teams' record schedules. We go through their off seasons. That is a series that we've been going through, and we're now closing up on the last two videos. So if you missed them, go out there and check out the channel. We've done every single NFL division, and we talk about every single NFL team. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up after that series, of course. But yeah, that's going to do it here. I'll see you guys tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. Reminder for the Bleacher Report stream. So download the Bleacher Report app. Type in my channel's name. My name will pop up, and I will be going live at 11 a.m. Eastern on Friday. But until then, stay happy, stay healthy, get out of here.